Right, good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Really pleased to see so many here in this another delightful Suffolk town in Mildenhall. This is the first time we've had our public meeting. Just so you know, we have these regular meetings once a year in each district and borough. Previous two occasions here in Forest Heath, we've been to Newmarket, and last year we were up at Brandon. So we do try to get around and divvy it up in a very fair way, because I get shot by it, I know that. So very pleased to see you here. The whole point about tonight is to give a brief overview of where we're going. Somebody sit.
Oh, sorry, we can't see you with the screen, so can you not stand in front of the screen?
Where do you want me to stand in?
That would be lovely.
Sorry about this. Standing like
Just a silhouette.
yeah, like fire here, burning the book. But no, so the idea is that we will talk a little bit to you, no more than 10 minutes each, when we get started. Then it's over to you, ladies and gentlemen. Please feel free to ask any question you like. Anything you're concerned about, anything you're unhappy about. Would you like to take compliments? There's some more beers coming in now. I like the start up here actually. But it's about you, the public, and so on. So it's really important. What I would like to do first of all, though, is to introduce you to Gareth, our temporary Chief Constable, Gareth Wilson, and Matt Rose, who will be known to many of you, the local inspector, about to be elevated or something like that. So well done, Matt. So let's get cracking. Then we can get on to the bit. That's me, Suffolk Police and Crime Commissioner. And I put this up this year because it's really important about engagement. This is why these meetings are so important, that we can hear direct from members of the public, young or old, what they think. But dear old Churchill there, quite a memorable occasion. I see Green King have just brought out an anniversary Churchill Ale, which is actually being used to support the charitable trust of the Churchill family and so on, just so you know. We learned about that yesterday. But courage is also what it takes to sit down and listen. And that's really important, that we are, all three of us here, to listen to what your concerns and so on are. I'm just going to give a very quick comment on those various pieces of the jigsaw there. Just to remind you, with great respect to those who probably heard this before, the role of the PCC is, number one, to look after the public interest. It was the abolition of the appointed police authority and replaced with a democratic mandate, albeit not a resounding turnout, I know. But generally speaking, democracy, I think, is a better way to do these things. Well, I would say that, of course. So it abolished the police authority, and I'm there elected on your behalf, representing the whole of Suffolk, which is a great privilege and an honour. I make no bones about that at all. And that's to hold Gareth, the Chief Constable, to account for all matters operational. Again, I do not and cannot, as set out in the legislation, interfere in operational matters. So if I said I want to go and arrest this person over here, that's not up to me, that is down to these guys. But what I do, on your behalf, is hold them to account at our regular accountability and performance panels over any aspect of policing that comes in from the public, other issues we as a team have a concern about. You actually directly hire or fire the Chief Constable, so the Chief Constable all over England and Wales is there employed by the PCC on the public's behalf. That is another big change. You're also overall in charge of the budget, and in Suffolk at the moment it's just over £120 million. The budget is being reduced by about £20 million over the next 5 years, and we'll be talking about that a little bit later. And it's very important with that budget setting process, the issue about the precept, the council tax that you pay. Now this year we did put it up for the first time in 3 years by 1.9%. That gives a yield of £832,000. There's only one other police and crime commissioner who hadn't put it up for the previous 2 years. Hello, Robin. And the reason it was put up this year is two or threefold. We do have a major programme of transformation, looking at all the budgets and everything that we are doing to make sure we are as efficient and effective as possible. And there is some way to go on that, but that of course can't all be done overnight. But we did ring-fence resources with that extra money to make sure that certain things are maintained, like the economic crime unit, looking after vulnerable people, particularly child sexual exploitation, serious sexual offences, quite a few historic cases coming forwards. So we do need the resources to be able to look after that. And we're also hoping to get a new roads policing for the west of the county to recognise obviously the dualling of the A11 and the recognition that the A11 and the A14 are really important major, well, they're international arteries and so on, so we have to look at that. So the overall thrust of this, looking at strategic direction and budget, the direction we have to go, in my view as a constabulary, is to join things up much more effectively right across the public and the voluntary sector. There is no way Suffolk would be half the county it is without the input of the voluntary sector. And that's such an important part of everything we do, from special constables who are true volunteers to all the other charities and many other organisations that exist, be it Neighbourhood Watch, Town Pastors and so on. Really, really important part of the Suffolk way of life. The transformation, which means radical change, is going to be challenging and quite difficult, but it is not impossible. There's absolutely no need for doom and gloom. The budget reductions represent about 3.5% to 4% a year. There are many private sector organisations and others who have achieved that, and we need to be doing the same. So the message is we have to be much more business-like about the way we operate. Having said all that, we are very lucky to live in a low crime area here in Suffolk. That's not to say it's perfect, it isn't. There are crimes that we have to deal with, and we do have a very good performing police force. I think I'm right in saying it's the third lowest cost per head of the population or anywhere in the country here in Suffolk. But we're not complacent. There are many things we need to do to improve public service to the public. Managing demand is another issue. I've said repeatedly, we're not an ambulance service or a mental health trust. There needs to be a far better balance across the public sector for these other organisations to take their responsibility more seriously, and the share of the budget reductions. If we work together in a constructive way, we can do it. Up to 30% of police officer time on occasions is used dealing with mental health issues. It's not to say we're not interested in that, of course, but it just needs to have a better balance. And I think that's something we're looking at. Partnership working, I'm very pleased that it looks as though we will now be getting some legislation to look very seriously at about joining blue light services, police and fire together. It's not just about that. I've spoken about the mental health issues that we've got. We signed the Concordat last year. We're only the third constabulary in England and Wales to do that, recognising that we have to pool resources and work together. Excellent relationships with local government. I'm very much looking forward to successful conclusions here in Mildenhall of the new hub, where we can all join in together. I think it's really important we're there to support each other, and tribute to the guys at Forest Heath who are pushing that forward. Great idea, and I'm sure it'll be very successful. But there are many other partnerships, of course. October the 1st last year, PCCs became responsible for victims commissioning right across England and Wales. At last, in my opinion, victims are being put much more at the centre point of the whole criminal justice system. I think for too long their needs have been neglected and ignored, and it doesn't matter whether you're an individual who's perhaps had their home burgled, that's extremely serious, or whether it's a company that has been subjected to financial fraud, which could collapse and 100, 200 people perhaps lose their livelihoods. Not acceptable. We have to do a lot to try and support people in that position. I will just mention some rather sordid issues here that we have to look at. The issue of course, illegal immigration is very often done at the behest of organised crime. Very vulnerable people come over here, put to work in the sex trade or cannabis farms. And we have to be aware of this. Very often it's organised crime who arranges for illegal people trafficking, and they are exploited. I think I'm right in saying last year in Suffolk there were 12 convictions for people who have been found guilty of domestic servitude, human slavery, modern day slavery, call it what you like. But that is here, 21st century Suffolk. Absolutely horrendous. And of course those dreadful pictures from the boat at Harwich at the weekend or end of last week bring it into sharp focus. Doing a huge amount of work on domestic abuse. We had a major piece of research commissioned by the University Campus Suffolk. And I have to say I was quite shocked by the findings of this. When you have 90% of the victims of domestic abuse are women, obviously 10% male, but some of the sheer barbarity and brutality of the offenders beggars belief. Where a lady is strangled repeatedly till she comes round 4 or 5 times, another one who was beaten up because she went round the corner to get a pint of milk and hadn't asked permission, where women are forced to perform sex acts in front of their children because of the depraved nature of certain individuals. Now, all of us at this table and the whole constabulary are deadly serious about getting these things dealt with. It's going to be difficult. Gareth is very kindly leading an initiative to get a lot of work joined up, and Robin at the back there is very much supportive of the work we're doing here over in West Suffolk. If we pull resources together, I'm sure we can make a difference, but we have got to do that. And we do need the public to get behind what's being done to link up the public and voluntary sector to deal with it. Because if we don't, the effects on children are very damaging. If they're brought up in an atmosphere of domestic abuse, they are highly likely to be the offenders of the future. So that's something we have to be serious about here in Suffolk. Commissioning and grants, you may recall I did actually ring fence £700,000 in the budget to help support all sorts of initiatives for community safety, the crime and disorder reduction grant. Not quite half of that is managed by the Suffolk Foundation on our behalf. The point being, ladies and gentlemen, it links up with other grants and sources of funding available across the county, so I hope we're getting better value for money. That can be used for any group putting in an application that supports the objectives of our police and crime plan. The police and crime plan, if you like, is the aid memoir for the operational side for the constabulary. They have to deliver it, but it's customising, dealing with and preventing crime here in Suffolk, which I do think is an improvement, because as I'm sure you'll agree, or hope you will do, the pattern of crime and our needs here in rural Suffolk are nowhere near the same as the middle of London or Manchester or the uplands of Wales or anything like that. So it's a common sense approach, in my view, and we need a lot more of it, I think, in public life. So commissioning and grants there are really, really important. I've spoken about the academic research into domestic abuse. There's a major report that hasn't been published yet into the use of crystal meths up in Lowestoft. And we've also done business crime research and so on, what are the things that matter to the economy. And the reason that's important, if we do not get the economy going well, it doesn't have the money earned to pay the tax base in order to have good public services. And I really think that's important. We've got a huge level of debt the country's still got to get rid of, and that isn't going to go away. And so we need to be really focused on how we can deal with that together. Innovation, I'm sure Gareth and Matt will talk about that a bit later, but we have been successful in attracting government grants for things like automatic number plate recognition. We've got another few £100,000 for a new community safety hub based in Ipswich. We've got a big grant for the programme of joint police and fire stations. There's another £5 million in the pot for a further, I think, 9 or 10 joint initiatives. And we've got a big grant also for a new IT project, the Athena project, covering 7 or 8 police forces. Anyway, several. Good Suffolk word, several. But if you are there prepared to change, the government will support you. If you want to bury your hand in the sand, head in the sand, get that right, like an ostrich, you're not going to get any help. So we know we have got to change and transform, and the government will be there to help us. Very briefly, new forms of crime. You may have read about the new cybercrime unit we launched a week ago today up at Halesworth. It is a joint one with Norfolk, but it is in Suffolk. And the point about this is it reflects the changing pattern of crime. So much more now is done online, be it fraud, be it child sexual exploitation. Sadly, you can pay, if you knew where to go, £10 with your credit card to watch live sexual abuse of young children. It is that depraved. And these are evil people who do this. They've got to be caught, but you need the resources to do it. Ticketing fraud, I've mentioned financial fraud, scams coming into emails. I suspect many of us have been subject to those. And of course the other problem we've now got is the abuse of social media. It never existed a few years ago, and whilst it's a great means of communication, of course it does present opportunities for pretty sinister, lousy people to misbehave. So again, we have to be up there with that. And I think organised crime deserves a mention. Please remember, whilst there's a reduction in the constabulary budget here in Suffolk, there are other resources that are available that we don't, I think, make enough of. The National Crime Agency, very pleased that we had Keith Bristow, the Director General, came to speak to us in Bury back in March. They have a budget of £650 million. That's an extra resource we didn't have a few years ago. The National Counter-Terrorism Network has got a budget of £450 million. Again, a new resource. And locally, the Eastern Region Special Operations Unit, with a budget of £16 million, deals with organised crime. And the way we go forward in the direction of travel, for those who like that sort of terminology, is to make sure we keep our county identity for the county policing. That is not up for negotiation, because you need to be able to relate to communities. We do collaborate with Norfolk in certain functions, and that on the whole works pretty well, but we also collaborate regionally and nationally, and even internationally. But the identity of Suffolk is really important, that all the villages, over 400 villages in Suffolk, can relate to their own constabulary, and that's something I'm very, very passionate about. And then lastly, of course, managing demand, but actually preventing demand, if we can in the first place, preventing crime. That is something we all have a responsibility for. How can we reduce crime and prevent it in the first place? So lots of things that we can do there. Youth groups, we put a lot of money into supporting youth groups, be it Positive Futures, Prince's Trust for people with a very disadvantaged background to help them get back on the straight and narrow. So that's a very quick whistle-stop tour, and I will now hand over to Gareth.
So that's the first time I've listened to you and had Kate Bush coming out over the speakers. Good evening. It's nice to see you all. I've met a few of you before, and tonight I've been around and seen a few of you as well. And what I like today is actually the broad range of people that we have in the room. Sometimes you get just one core element of people, but tonight I think, having had a chat with you, it's a really good range. So it's really pleasing to see you this evening. I'm going to just go through one slide, that's okay, and I'll make sure I stand out of the way of the slide over here. That just goes through those 4 bullet points. Now, a lot of it just reinforces what Tim has said, but in addition to that, just provides a few more pieces of information from the operational side of it. As Tim said, what happens is he writes the police and crime plan, having obviously listened to everything that you've got to say, and my role is to be held to account and lead the organisation to deliver what's written within that police and crime plan. So, in that context, I'll just go through these bullet points. Tim's already mentioned the budget savings. It's £20.5 million, which sounds a huge amount from a £120 million budget, but we have already identified where 3/4 of that money will come from. So we've got plans in place which will mean that we will mitigate the risk that could present to the organisation, and I'm going to explain tonight why I think it's absolutely doable. First of all, and we've used the analogy before in different meetings, traffic officers no longer stand on point and wave bicycles, pedestrians, horses and carts through, but now actually deal with quite fast motor vehicles. And if we'd left them standing on point duty, they wouldn't have been much good today dealing with the crimes and the issues that we have to face with roads policing. And I use that analogy because actually our organisation is absolutely ripe for change, ripe for modernisation, and can do things in a completely different way. And when I come through to technological innovation, I'll give you some really good examples of how, through some work we've done with Tim and Tim's requests through to the Home Office for funding, we've been given funding by the Home Office that have allowed us to put in some fantastic technology that allows us to do what multiple police officers can do, but through a technological solution. So, the whole emphasis of the change programme I'm currently leading is not just to find the savings, but to completely change the way in which we provide the service to you. What's really important for me to sort of understand is actually the demands that are placed upon our organisation. Now, hitherto, in years gone by, I think we'd all agree that there have been problem pubs, there have been some issues with the nighttime economy, and we've had to put loads of police officers in to deal with that. Now, we know that crime in that area is decreasing, and that visible, interactive crime face-to-face on the street is something that not only our crime statistics show is going down, but also the national surveys that are done independent of the police as well. But whilst crime is going down, the demand placed upon our organisation remains static. So we're still getting the same number of calls into our organisation asking for help, asking for guidance and asking for assistance, but what we haven't got is that crime that we had seen before. And I'm thankful that that's going down. Now, Tim has already mentioned how some of that has changed. So, we have got a teenager sitting at home in a room on a computer, interacting purely through that computer, and they are having, bullying, they're having cyberbullying. There are examples of where they're being exploited sexually by people on the other end of the line. And we really need to make sure that we change our organisation to be able to provide the services that all of our community needs. And we need to balance that visible policing, which provides you with the reassurance that you need about how you go about your day-to-day business, It allows us to deal with the crimes which still do take place out in the street, but also allows us to deal with crimes that are being committed. Sometimes the aggrieved party will be sitting in a bedroom in Suffolk, but the person perpetrating the crime will be sitting on the other side of the world. And we need to make sure we change our organisation to be able to deal with that. So, for example, at the moment you have a safer neighbourhood team, and that core of safer neighbourhood teams and that theory around safer neighbourhood teams will be going forward what our whole policing model is based upon. But I'm also asking the ACC that's dealing with it to ensure that we have an online safer neighbourhood team. So non-geographic in its existence, but it will deal with the communities of Suffolk, but it will be able to interact with people to make sure that they are able to receive the same level of service as somebody who sees a police officer or calls up for service through the telephone. In relation to the organisation's development through change, there are a few things which are really important for me to enable us to change properly. Now, I've already used the example of providing high visibility policing deterrence to the nighttime economy. Now, up until very recently, if a supervisor, manager would have seen a crime sort of like starting to develop in an area, perhaps having loads of burglaries in a particular area, they'd want to ensure that their staff were there all of the time. There's a highly visible presence, fluorescent jackets deterring people. Now, what's happened is there is a series of work being undertaken by universities where they are developing evidence-based policing practice. So in other words, making sure that what we think through our professional knowledge works actually does. Now, this was lifted from the medical profession, who radically overhauled how they dealt with patients, and if you look all the way back through to smallpox, where they conducted experiments to see what worked in terms of treatment. Well, you can actually lift that theory and put it into policing as well, and they have done. So they've had very similar areas, receiving the same issues in terms of villainy coming in and committing crime types, and they've worked out what actually works in terms of visibility. And rather than putting a police officer in a place for 2 hours, that will tell us that if you put them there for 10 minutes, that has as much effect on the reduction of crime as putting a police officer there for 2 hours. And you can see, therefore, if we take that and put it all the way through everything that we deal with in policing, there's huge efficiencies that can be done to make sure we can still provide that decent quality service with fewer members of staff. We also, as an organisation, are committed from moving from a high-cost crisis intervention service, and if you can think there, what I'm saying is when we put a 999 vehicle out, double crewed, and that everybody has to turn up to a particular incident, that costs us a fortune. Now we're actually moving to make sure we deal with things right at the earliest opportunity to make sure it doesn't develop into that. So with Tim's work around domestic abuse, making sure we interact with the voluntary sector and with other service providers to get into people before they have any interaction with the police, right at the very earliest opportunity, before that escalation means they have to dial 999 and get us around there really, really quickly. In addition to that, innovation is absolutely central to how we are going to develop as an organisation. I mentioned it earlier on, and it's just really important just to cover a couple of areas just to show you what we're looking at and the kind of stuff we are dealing with. So, automatic number plate recognition. You've probably seen programmes such as The Interceptors on television, where you see the technology that's used, and rather than having a police officer standing by the side of the road, manually passing over to a controller every single number plate that they want to have checked going through the system, and an operator actually sitting there and having to do all the checks manually, the automatic number plate reader will do thousands and thousands and thousands of checks in a day. Then you can see then, if we get the checking done in terms of the cars that are going through, we have our databases absolutely spot on to make sure we concentrate on those vehicles which are causing us the most problems, and we have the investment in the staff that sit within the control rooms to give the ability to, once something pings up and says a car's just driven past Barton Mills on the A11, heading towards Newmarket, that we're able to have a controller there to deploy a member of staff to actually intercept it before it gets off on its way out through the county. That works. It's really, really good for us. Not only does it work in terms of giving us that information live time, it also allows us to investigate more serious crimes, so we know who's going through our county, and perhaps if there was a murder or something along those lines, that's a wealth of information that's available to that investigation team. We also have a reviewed and revised mobile computer working. I know from having had a chat with the staff when I visited them over in Mildenhall last week, they have taken delivery of the new mobile working solution. What that means in layman's terms, in terms that I'd understand, is they've got computers they can take out from the police station, they can go out, they've got the whole access to the computers if they were sitting in the police station, so they can do their work out and about, and they've got the ability to be able to connect to the police systems and give that information that they need. Before this new initiative, computers were passed out, but they were no good at all, because the signal didn't work, they were unable to perform their job, and they kept pinging back to the police station all the time to make sure that they were able to just update the computers, and they were an absolute slave to going into the police station. I'm sure you can see if we give them the computers, they don't have to go back out there, then they will be more visible in your communities every day, rather than sitting in the police station being a slave to that desk that they have to sit there and type stuff in all the time. So those are the two I'm going to concentrate on. Tim's also mentioned Athena, and I won't go into too much detail, save us to say that does give us a really good opportunity to deal with other forces and all around the eastern region and across into Kent, and also others are looking at it as well. That will give us access to a wealth of detail about villains that cross boundaries and that will come into Suffolk from elsewhere as well. So a really good opportunity for us. Finally, my final bullet point is just around the public sector and looking at the response to demands across the whole public sector. I think it's fair to say that politicians and senior officers within both the police and broader public sector are absolutely committed to making sure that we provide a decent quality service to you, our communities. I think it's also fair to say that up to this point, whilst we've been working together with people and other departments, other public sector agencies, we are still fairly inefficient in how we deal with the joint problems that we face. So, for example, a family, an individual will still have social workers, still have police officers, still have somebody from education, etc., 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 going around to their house and dealing with them on a day-to-day basis. Now, part of that is purely a police response, part of that is purely a social services response, as an example, and the bit in the middle, there's complete ambiguity around who's responsible for it. Now, if we join up the services that we provide, rather than doubling up on it all the time, you can see how we can become more efficient. And that's absolutely vital if we're to provide that quality service going forward. But as I say, real commitment from the public sector to make sure we deliver the right service to you. So in conclusion, yep, we've got a bit of a challenge ahead of us. Yes, it's absolutely doable, and we are absolutely ripe for change to make us a modern police service from which hopefully you'll feel proud of the service we provide to you. Thank you.
Thanks, Gareth. Now Matt's going to put it into the local context for what's happening here in Forest Heath. So over to you, Matt. Thanks.
Thank you, and fantastic to see so many of you here tonight. I'll just quickly have a quick overview of performance first of all before I go on to talk about a few local initiatives and what's happening in the district. Just a quick overview. We aim to get to 90% of our emergencies within 20 minutes. Last financial year we just missed out. I'm putting it down mostly to all the roadworks and difficulties we had on the A11. It's back up to now 90%, and we're able to travel much more quickly around the district on the A11 now. It's reopened and vastly improved. 85% of victims satisfied, something we're very proud of, but we'd like 100%. So we're still working on that, but it's still a good figure. Assaults are up 14%, and actually, as the Chief said there, we're not seeing, it's not what you'd think it might be. It's not the assaults outside nightclubs, because we know they're going down. We've done some work, and the majority of these are domestic violence cases, And actually, when you think that, is there any more domestic violence than there was a few years ago? Probably not. Are people much more likely to report it now? Well, I like to think so. And that's why we've seen those increase in the figures. Homes burgled. It is awful to have your home burgled. Homes burgled last year down by 7%. And just to put some context in there, we had about 150 burglaries in the district last year. Still 150 too many, but there are around 25,000 households in the district, and we had fewer than 3 burglaries in a week, and that's the whole district. Robberies down, antisocial behaviour incidents, which can really affect people's quality of life, down by a huge number, a third. So just a quick overview really of some of the things that we're getting up to in the towns. With key members of the Newmarket Vision Group working to make improvements within Newmarket. Love Where You Live Brandon, we're linking with Forest Heath District Council to get on the back of their anti-littering campaign to actually say and work with them what a great place Brandon is to live. Parking issues, I get probably an email a week on parking issues. I know it's an emotive subject. Mr. Passmore touched on some of the things we as an organisation, even locally, have to face, looking to protect those most vulnerable in society. So often we're not able to offer the parking enforcement you'd like. However, we are working closely with the district and town councils, and we would like the district to take it on the civil enforcement of car parking issues, which would allow them to seek to provide a better parking service and us to concentrate on things that are really causing people distress and harm the community. Safe neighbourhood priority setting. We did have a system where we worked on a quarterly basis to set the safe neighbourhood team priorities. We found that wasn't dynamic and quick enough. So we worked with the Forest Heath District Council, with the Crime Prevention Panel, and I'll come on to them in a second, just to come up with a more dynamic way where actually if there's something there and then, an emerging issue within our communities, we can declare it a priority then and there rather than waiting for 3 months and then get on to resolve it. Police stations, we spoke earlier about the Mildenhall hub, so multi-agency, the vision is here in Mildenhall, a multi-agency hub, with all public services in one place. In Brandon, to a certain extent, we've already got that, and that's been really successful in that shared building, the library, and there's a preschool group. And Newmarket, we've still got that big old police station on Vicarage Road. It's not fit for our purposes anymore, so we're exploring options and working through how we can best use that building for modern day policing. And I'm really proud of what my local safe and neighbourhood teams do on a daily basis here in Forest Heath. I did ask each of the sergeants just to send me an email with a bit of flavour of stuff they've been up to, and I was inundated, so I've just taken a few off here. Crucial Crew, we are all of us here are so lucky to have the Forest Heath Crime Prevention Panel, which is, without a doubt, certainly in my opinion, the best, most active crime prevention panel in the county. We all get a fantastic service from them. They're not too nasty to me, but they do have their moments. I'm kidding. Every year they work really hard to put on a Crucial Crew event, supported by my officers, some of them who give up their leave to go and help for the week. Hundreds of school children throughout that week get a day of inputs on safety. I see somebody there nodding, but on cybercrime, stranger danger, if you like, on road safety, on all sorts of bits and pieces. And that is a really worthwhile event which touches all of our children here in Forest Heath. Multi-agency demand reduction, again, my colleagues have spoken about that, but we work really hard. There's a gentleman here from Flagship Housing tonight. We work really closely with our partners to resolve some issues. Joint hotspot patrols with the USAF, and without them, we do checks on unattended cars just to see if they've got anything on display. And just to give you an idea, in April alone, my staff checked, whilst on foot patrol, 900 vehicles across Forest Heath, and every single one of those vehicles which was insecure, had items on display, the owner got, we spoke to them or sent them a letter. Property marking, so we work with allotment associations for garden equipment, catalytic converters, all sorts. Not just Christmas and Halloween events, we work at hundreds of events throughout the year, including the Mildenhall cycling rally last year, we're doing it again this year, and we're really proud of that engagement. Drugs warrants, the Safe Neighbourhood team do loads of those, so they're not just doing the fluffy handing sweets to kids on Halloween stuff. Actually, they're out putting indoors as well on a regular basis. And you can follow what we're up to. I know it's not everyone's cup of tea, but we do put what we're up to on the internet through social media, on Twitter, and you can follow what we're up to on a daily basis. Thank you.
Good. Right, thanks very much, Matt. Now, ladies and gentlemen, it's going to be, get my signal right, turn that off. Just before we get going with questions, if anybody wants contact business cards, they're all over there, so please feel free to take them. Contact me at any time, whatever you like. So, now it's over to you. Questions for any of us up here. Sometimes it will affect all three of us. So,
Mr. Passmore, what percentage of your budget is spent on personnel, and how high do you think it ought to be?
the percentage budget for the whole of the constabulary budget is nearly 80%, and I think that's as high as we can probably go, because we still need to look at buildings. The estate is worth about £30 million, apart from the custody suites at Bury and down in Ipswich. If you look at a vehicle fleet of 750 units, and then all the other normal supplies that you get and so on. So I think that's about as high as it can go. One of the responsibilities I have as Police and Crime Commissioner, it says in the legislation, to make sure you have an efficient and an effective police force. And part of that means that we have sufficient resources allocated for the right equipment, training, development, new technology. And that's why we apply for these government fundings. And that, to be fair, that's something, whilst you've got a good track record, I think we can do better in. So that's what we need to do.
How does 80% compare to other police forces? Is that high or low?
I think we are probably one of the higher ones. And one of the reasons that we have a very good track record of collaboration, not just with Norfolk. I mentioned about the Eastern Region unit, also with local government and other partners. And therefore, that means that you can pull some of the other resources. So the Mildenhall hub, can't wait for that to get going. I think it's a great idea. We will sort out Newmarket, because it's that place just needs, if you could flatten it and build a new one or something, we'd do it. But it's complicated ownership and so on, but we are working on that very, very hard. Because Newmarket needs a modern police station. If we could find a way where we could collaborate with other parts of the public sector, we would love to do it. So if anybody's got any ideas or magic wands or something, please let us know. We really do need to hear some ideas. So that's the way forward. Sharing of resources. The people are the most important asset in the business. Without them being properly trained and motivated, we're on a hiding to nothing. Really crucial we look after everybody in the constabulary. But thanks for the question. Who's next? Do you want to mention anyone? Well, Gareth's just reminded me, we've got this big budgetary process. We're taking some external advice, a form of zero-based budgeting, at least looking at the activities we're doing, to get right down to the bottom of where every single penny is spent. If we can transform the organisation, which we will have to do, and are doing, we do need to know where we're starting from. That's never been done before, and it's quite interesting to reflect that the National Counter-Terrorism Network is going through that process, and it's making savings of around 14 to 15% without affecting the front line. This process is all about maintaining that interaction, that service that the public, residents and businesses need. So we've already started work on that. We hope to have the initial findings sorted out ready for the budget process for next year. So that's a really big piece of work. Along with an estates review, making sure that fits in, public access review, and a community safety review with our partners. All of these things need to be entwined together. You can't do one on its own. You need to look at how they all affect each other. So, anybody else? It must be someone else. So,
yes, please.
Of course.
The inspectors rather remove the rug from under me about traffic problems here in Liverpool. Yellow lines mean nothing
Yep.
in Liverpool. By vans, lorries, you name it. Also, disabled bays. you get abandoning, you get cars not disposing any baggage. And when I reported this to the Parish Council the latter part of last year, the problem with that, she came back to me and said, nobody's interested, you can park where you want to.
Tell that to some of my staff that disagree by issuing tickets on a daily basis. Like I said earlier, you know, we've got a lot of demands on us.
Yeah.
So actually, what we would like to do, and we are working with the local council, is for them to take on the enforcement.
Yeah.
But we are out there giving out tickets on a daily basis, and if you're blocked in, if there's a car in a dangerous position, please call us on 101. I can't guarantee we're going to be there straight away, but certainly we can be aware of the problem then and target our resources while we're still responsible for the enforcement. We're happy to do it. So please, if if there's somebody blocking the pavements or somebody in a wheelchair can't go past, all those sort of things, please give us a call on 101 and we'll certainly do our best.
But I'm going to say, if you go into Market Square each day, I will see infringements going on all the time.
Okay.
And we are, and I'm sure you'll see, if you're at the Market Square, you'll see my staff about as well.
I'll just
in
add,
uniform.
yeah.
They'll be about.
Yeah. I will add one thing that Matt said there, which is really important. We do need, I'm a district councillor in Mid-Suffolk. I used to be leader of Mid-Suffolk District Council. Suffolk is one of the few counties where the local authorities don't actually do parking enforcement. I think we need to do that, but I do think there's an opportunity. Clearly there are concerns about cost and all this sort of thing, but I've just thought, last Monday there was a joint traffic initiative in Suffolk about making sure people have vehicles taxed properly. The joint approach with, I think it was 6 police forces, certainly 4, border control, immigration control and so on, working together. I don't see why we shouldn't be able to develop a similar scheme across the whole of Suffolk with all the local authorities, that's the districts and boroughs involved. And then we don't all need to have our own people doing it all the time. We could have some, if you like, collaboration. We could have a purge on various areas to make sure that people understand if you park in the wrong place, and you've got to be pretty dim not to see a double yellow line, and it's unacceptable to park in a disabled place. However infuriating it is, and we all feel that at times, I know, but they're there for a reason. And I think if we were able to work together, we could hit various places, metaphorically speaking, of course, and have a really good go at it. So instead of everybody having a huge cost, which nobody's in the position to do, why don't we do something like we've done for traffic police? So I'll definitely take that forward. It has been discussed at public sector leaders, but you need to chivvy us politicians and give us a kick in the pants on occasion to get things done.
Some progress could be made.
It could be, but I will take that.
Just one more point. St Andrew Street, the yellow lines there degraded to such an extent where we were unable to issue tickets, but we worked closely with the council to repaint those lines. So we are kind of aware of the issues and working to resolve them.
Yeah. And I'll also take that point up. We've got a meeting with the new county council portfolio holder for roads. So again, that's where working together makes a difference. But thanks for that question. It comes up everywhere. So.
Yes, talking about the hub, which I think is terrific, or the idea is terrific, let's hope it happens. Why is it such a problem with Newmarket and Brandon? Why don't we just have one hub for Newmarket, Brandon and Mildenhall, in Mildenhall? From a cost point of view, it just seems would be logical.
Well, I'm quite certain. I'll bring Gareth in a minute. One of the things it's about the presence. It's a question of customising what you need. I mean, you've got 3 decent-sized towns in Forest Heath. The presence there, I think, is about public reassurance, trust and confidence. But I believe you me, we are really looking at costs all over the place. So there are elements of that. But the one at Brandon works really well. That's a good example of pooling resources to save a lot of cost. I went up there. It was a really hot day last July, and one of the first actually here in the whole of Suffolk actually collaborated like that. So we're definitely on the case. Do you want to say something about Newmarket?
I guess the work that we've done as a team to look at how we do deliver services, Tim's absolutely right. There needs to be some form of local interaction. I'll leave it at sort of as broad as that. We also then have, I guess, 3 key elements: is the safer neighbourhood teams, which to me you have to have locally to make sure they're not travelling for a long time to get to a particular location. You've got response teams that you want to make sure if you dial 999 they get there when they need to. And you've got investigation teams as well that are able to pick up, some of those trickier crimes that need to be investigated. And just to give you absolute assurance that in the estates review that's being undertaken following, our plan in relation to where we're going, this is absolutely the kind of stuff that we do sit there and consider. So we need to know where it's best to work with our public sector agencies, where we need a presence because we need to be able to do various things, and we all work together. And in fact, you know, in the counties that I've worked in, Suffolk is the county where the public sector are getting together and saying, let's build this together. You know, we don't need it here, so let's build just joint fire and police. Actually, we need a library in this one, we can do that there as well. And some really good work that sits here and says what we need is this, let's provide it all together. So we do look at it, and it depends on which area needs which particular function.
I was thinking more of your comments about the technology.
Yeah.
Because that links in, doesn't it?
It does.
Presumably, if guys have got technology out there, your guys, they don't really need to be that near to the station.
Once they're out, they're out. We used to call it the elastic band effect. So you took them out and they pinged straight back in as soon as they dealt with something, because they had to come back and deal with the computer.
Yeah, quite.
You're absolutely spot on.
Yeah.
The ability to be able to work remotely allows us to have a look at how they're based and where they're based.
And when it comes to public access, you're going to have one person who serves a multitude of agencies, instead of us all having our own person who might, in a police station, get, I don't know, half a dozen people visiting a day if you're lucky. One practitioner can deal with all of the things, hand the inquiries on, and I'm not even averse to having some information centres or reception desks. Some people have tried it elsewhere in the country at the back of the supermarket. They are open many, many hours, 7 days a week. And again, we have to be innovative and look at ways of doing it, as long as the confidential nature of any inquiry can be dealt with as well. But so there's lots and lots of things to look at there, and others are keen to do it. So the lady moving around there towards the back.
I'm confused about the lack of signage or the speed limit along Kingsway. I lived on Kingsway for 12 years, and the speeding has just gotten worse and worse. And the explanation that was given as to why there's no 30-mile-an-hour limit was as clear as mud. So maybe you can explain it, because I know that College Heath has both the light posts that designate a residential area and a speed limit sign. And the second part of my question that kind of ties into that is, I don't know the coverage of CCTV around Mildenhall. I know there's one over by the co-op, but I know that one along Kingsway would be very helpful, especially with the crosswalk.
Okay, that's a local job there for you, mate.
You're right. The issues around the 30-mile-an-hour signage are quite complex, and I'm not going to pretend to explain, or even perhaps I'm not even sure myself in some cases. But what I can say is we have looked at Kingsway, and essentially it's about how far apart the street lamps are. And if the street lamps are within a certain distance of each other, no more signage is allowed. You only get the small repeaters when the light posts are further than the set distance. I think it's 100 feet are apart. So signage is a county council issue down to highways, and it's to do with the distance of the street lamps apart. And there's some lawful legislation.
Is there a drawback though? What's the reason behind that? Is there a drawback to having just a reminder that it's 30 miles an hour?
You have it is legislation. You have to speak to the county council. You're much better off speaking to the county council, and I'm sure there's probably people from parish and district councils here who've looked before, because I often get that question. Somebody's nodding here, and it is down to the distance of the street lamps are away from each other.
It's deemed by highways not to be necessary if there is sufficient light. That was the answer we got in our village from you.
So the second part of your question was about CCTV. And the CCTV, we do have some cameras linked to a local control room in Mildenhall, and basically we work with the council very closely to site those where they're going to create the most impact. And we constantly work to look at that, but our nighttime economy, our fights outside clubs, things like that are decreasing. But we continue to work on that. We look at where our crime's happening. We work with the local council so they're sited in the best place. And we have worked with them before to move a camera from somewhere because somewhere's closed down, and we move it somewhere else. So if we're aware of specific incidents, we'll work with the council to do that.
If you'd like to drop me an email about speeding, it's because I've got a meeting set up with the new portfolio holder for transport in the County Council. And Matt's absolutely right, there are always legal requirements. That of course doesn't mean it has to stay there forever, and if there are particular issues then I can hand them on to the County Council portfolio holder, because it needs to be addressed. The last thing the public want is someone to, well, it's someone else's responsibility. That may well be the case, but that's where we need to work together. We have the Suffolk Road Safe Board where things like that are discussed. We're on there as well as the County Council. So take a card and drop us a line and we'll see what we can do. Is that related to?
It is
okay.
related
I'll do it, and then
to
I'll come
that.
to the lady next to you.
Sorry, if I just may. Mildenhall Parish Council does have a highways group which has been
Right.
looking at speed as one of the issues
Yeah.
in the town. And we also have been looking at Suffolk County Council, the new portfolio of James
Finch.
because we are also concerned and have been working on that issue.
Yeah.
We might be able to...
Yeah, by all means do that, yeah. And just whilst we're talking about speed, because it comes up, we could have guaranteed you were having a laugh before, and speed comes up everywhere. And we did actually change the pattern of deployment for the constabulary on the basis of the evidence we have from 2,000 people who kindly responded to a survey on speeding at a Suffolk show we started 2 years ago. And the way, if you are concerned about speed in your village or any residential area, please go through your Safer Neighbourhood team. You have a concern, and that should then get put on a rota so that you do get back up with speed enforcement. If that doesn't happen, by all means drop me a line directly. Sometimes things do fall through the loop, that's not intentional, and we had one over a village called Charlesfield over in East Suffolk a little while ago. That was just, it got left out of the road. It shouldn't have been, but we've got that put right. So we are there to help. We're really concerned about speeding. There is that leeway given to people, it's public knowledge. 10% over plus 2 miles an hour is where the cut-off point is. And people who say, well, they're only doing 35, 36. The trouble is, as I'm sure you'll agree, you've got to have a cut-off point somewhere. You can't keep on and on. So it is an issue we take seriously, and it comes up everywhere, and we will certainly do what we can. If we need more enforcement, well, that's where Gareth and I have to have a discussion on how we can do it.
Just a couple more bits, sorry, on speeding, so I know you're desperate to ask a question there. We did do some work in Kingsway very recently with the council, and they put one of their devices down which just tracks the speed of vehicles going over, and just 6% were over the speed limit. Now I know that's 6% too many, but you'll probably appreciate that there's other places in the county where it's much higher than that, which the council are looking to tackle first. The other thing, I was speaking to the local sergeant who covers the Mildenhall Safe and Able team. There's 13 towns and villages within Mildenhall SNT area, and they endeavour to do 2 speed enforcements in every one of those villages a month. So they've got lots of demands on their time. They've also set themselves a target of doing 26 lots of speed enforcements around the county a month as well, which is, you know, they've got their work cut out just to do that. So we are working really hard. We are aware of some of the issues. We are working with some of our partners, and we're busy doing that, but I'm grateful for your comments.
Thank you very much. The lady next door.
Well, I was run over on Kingsway 2 years ago, and people still don't stop there. But there's no CCTV, and the council said we weren't allowed to have it. On Friday, that's 2 years ago, on Friday, I came out of my driveway onto the pavement, and a motorcycle came straight across and missed me by a whisker, literally, sent straight across the pavement.
Can I answer that?
Yep, ma'am.
You called us straight away, and we were there within moments.
No, nobody came down to see us.
Well, we don't go to the scene straight away because you've given the
No,
direction
people
of the
did right
traffic.
back, but the point was, if there'd been CCTV there, they would have been caught, wouldn't they? My husband got part of the registration number, but it didn't come up with the thing he should have done. And I would hate to think these people think they can do that sort of thing and get away with it.
If we catch them, they're not going to get away with it, quite simply. And we're doing extra patrols there. My staff, including myself, was obviously made aware of that, and we'll do our best to tackle that. But it's an isolated incident from.
Well, it wasn't isolated for me. I could have been dead, and I've just over 2 years got my compensation for that. And I think it would have been null and void anyway if I was dead. And I could easily have been. It just zoomed straight across onto the pavement.
Yeah, gentleman there.
There's an issue with lots of vehicles in this area driving around with illegal lighting. Very obviously illegal, I believe. And I have reported this and there's been no action. We're talking about vehicles driving with the front side lights amber, rear lights off in the daytime. At night time, the front side lights are amber and their rear side lights are red. Now, I cannot believe that's legal. And we're talking hundreds of vehicles. They must have been seen by our local police officers. And nothing's happened.
Yeah,
Operational.
Sorry.
Operational.
It is, and having had the pleasure of going out with the roads policing units that cover this area, I can tell you that we stopped 3 vehicles in the time I was with them, and they had issues with lighting or windows in terms of the tinting on it, which were addressed and dealt with. We've said that going forward, we really feel that both the Police and Crime Commissioner and myself, in terms of the organisation, that roads policing is one of the most important factors that we have in the county. Because the strategic road network, so because the A11 and the A14 is just so important to us as a country as well as to a county. But actually, when it comes back to what am I here for in terms of delivering a service to the public, if I don't deal with some of the issues around the road network and safer roads, then actually it's people, and this lady I know sadly was involved in that road crash, you know, it is people that get injured, seriously injured or even killed. So we think it's an absolute priority going forward that our roads policing unit not only remains the size it is, but also increases in size to recognise the importance of that strategic roads network in the county.
But why hasn't this issue been dealt with already? It's been going on for 20 years.
Well, I mean, all I can say is I have been out with those members of staff and dealing with this. Are you talking specifically about service personnel and issues around?
I think most of the vehicles, I'm not saying every one, but most of the vehicles are American, I would say. They're imported and they have different lighting over there. Some British mechanics have a fiddle and he can't quite hack the system. So they always end up with both front indicator lights permanently on and at the rear they aren't on at all. Now this has significance for children crossing roads. If they see a vehicle coming down with his left indicator illuminated, they might think he's going to turn left and step in front of the vehicle. So it's quite important. But here's the thing, the British police don't have to do anything except liaise with the American-based police and they'll sort it out if they're all American vehicles. So there's no workload for you at all. So why isn't it done?
Okay, now I know what Matt's going to say now because I've been up to the base and I've spoken with the base about the interaction that he has personally and actually the briefings that he conducts not only with new members of staff turning up to the base, but actually, and we talked the other day, when new commanders come in, going around with new commanders as well to reinforce some of the policing issues. And I know, from having been up there last week, how effective that interaction is. Matt talked about the issues around service personnel being amongst those that are most vulnerable because they leave stuff out and about. And the signs, and I'm sure they won't put on just for me, but the signs as you leave the base all talked about personal safety, looking after your property, looking after your valuables. Now to me, that shows the level of interaction there is, but I'll let Matt just describe how he goes about dealing with that interaction.
Just one thing I forgot to mention. Although most of these vehicles, I'd say 99% of them are American, they're all driving on British registration numbers. I assume, therefore, they have to pass a British MOT. How can you pass a British MOT with illegal lighting? And which garage is responsible? Are we talking one garage?
You're absolutely spot on. Essentially, US personnel can bring one vehicle with them to the UK. What they do is they'll probably run it. You'll have seen them on their American, usually number plates here. I think they have 30 days to register and then get their vehicle MOT'd here in the UK as a special single vehicle assessment to make sure that the lighting is correct. They then get their British number plates. They can only get those British number plates once they've passed that initial single vehicle special MOT for new imports into the country. So I'm not an expert on vehicle lighting or the MOT test, but all I can say is I'm making the assumption that it's part of the test and they have, I appreciate it's inconvenient what you see, but it actually sounds to me like that is legal.
If you give us what you've seen afterwards, though, we'll do a bit of research for you.
I've got no doubt, but even if it were legal, it's dangerous because it can confuse anyone, but particularly children who've not got the experience to realise what's happening.
What I'll do, I'll get you details afterwards. I'll talk through exactly what the issue is, and then I'll speak to some people who know a bit more about the subject than me. But they do have to have an MOT.
Okay, well, thanks for raising that, and of course this is a very good example of where you're able to raise these issues directly, which perhaps in the past didn't happen. I'm going to work my way around, then I'll come back this side. That's all right, sir, at the back there.
Vicious circle. Communication. When I came tonight, I was asked where I live, and I was reluctant to say, and I'll be honest, I asked Tim how he came to Mildenhall today, and it was down the A14 through Tuddenham, where is now the sat-nav route. We are a C road, and twice a month the speed limit is a joke. A vicious circle. We have a parking problem where vehicles are parked on the pavement because of the high speed in the road. But pedestrians have to walk on the road to get round vehicles at times. Come night time, due to cutbacks, the street lights go on. Chum. Half the vehicles or more are parked the wrong way. Again, a crime. When we had a policeman in the village, PC still would knock on the door and say, can you park the correct way? Can you not block the pavement? What we got, PCSO, no powers, puts a leaflet through the door, is ignored. Speeding. You go to other villages on an A road, they've got the detector van. We're a C road. All we've got is a speed watch team that stand there with their triangles out, plenty of notification, bright yellow jackets, full vision, people slow down. They've recorded 63 miles an hour speed through Tuddenham. We're now getting foreign vehicles since the A11's dual code. They're coming through, down the A11, through Tuddenham. We don't see a policeman except blue lights, 60 miles an hour through the village, all day, every day. If we had a policeman there, it makes a hell of a difference. No disrespect to your officer, but he's now got Red Lodge, which has exploded in numbers, plus other villages. So we hear about Mildenhall. What about the villages and the speed? You can do that?
Just first of all, I think in relation to speeding, it's really important that I just reinforce something that Tim described earlier on, because actually we have got a different method of dealing with speeding issues now. And I was really pleasing to see you've got an effective community speed watch, because actually volunteering in the community is something that's fantastic to be done, but you need our support in relation to what you're doing. I completely get that and understand it. So I need to understand from Matt and from the roads policing team what has taken place. I completely understand where you're coming from, because you're absolutely spot on. The sat-nav takes you directly through there, every sat-nav takes you directly through there, and it's an issue that quite clearly is either being addressed, and I'll let Matt describe what's going on locally in a minute, but the issue that I've got is just to say to you that system escalates. So the issues that you find in relation to community speed watch, the speeds that you put through there, I will only deploy a speed camera van where it's escalated and we believe that now needs to take place. I need to take away your issues, have a look at it with my roads policing superintendent to see what's been done there, and I'll do that on your behalf, see what response we've put in there and review whether we've adhered to our policy in relation to it. The second point I want to go on to before I just pass across to Matt is the issue around the staffing across the whole county. We've committed to making sure that our principle of safer neighbourhood teams exists going forward. So it's the future. And we want to make sure that you've got an identifiable resource that's able to deal with those issues for you. And in our restructure of the whole organisation, which we're going to present to the Police and Crime Commissioner later on this year, we'll outline how we can provide that coverage across the whole of the county. Now, what's important is Suffolk is a place where certain areas are having more development. and we're going to make sure we recognise where those developments are, so we're able to more ably deal with the issues that are being raised with the expanding population. But Matt, in relation to Tottenham and the speed specifically?
Yeah, do you know, I've got a lot of empathy because I know I've seen how busy that route is through Tottenham, and I think, did you say you're from the parish council?
So
you say you're from the parish council?
I'm not from the parish council, no.
But it'd be worth working with them to speak to highways, a kind of a longer term issue as well around the status of that road, because, like you said, it is the default route now, pretty much between Mildenhall and Bury. So I've got my empathy there. I do know recently the council have had one of their devices out which just measures how many vehicles go past on that road, because I saw it out there, and that also measures the speed as well. So the county council will have some data. I haven't seen it, but they will have some data, and I can certainly ask them for it just out of interest to see the number of vehicles.
And that's what will trigger the issue around the speed detection van, because if we're coming up with this consistent, there are loads of people speeding going through there, then that's when a speed detection van gets put out.
The village is doing everything it can with speeding in the village. We are now at one end of the village, to me it's the wrong end, of getting a 40 mile an hour buffer zone before we come into the village. We've got funding for that, but it took 3 months to get the police permission to put that in, according to the parish council. They had applied for it and it was dragged, and we still haven't got this 40 mile buffer zone. The accidents happen down the other end of the village, the Mildenhall end.
Well, without looking at it, I don't know the answer to your question. What I would say is it's a county council responsibility in terms of speed limits, and we work with the county council. I'm not saying an excuse that we have dealt with it on time. I'm saying I don't know, but it's certainly something I'll go away and have a look at for you.
But again, can I just say, the officer, we had no reports, no contact now at a parish council meeting with the police. They used to come in, 5 minutes, give a report and go. If you look at our minutes online, the last 4 or 5 months.
Right, I can remember that. Yeah.
So with no contact.
No, and I can certainly remedy that, and I do write in certain parish magazines, and I'm asked for comment in Neighbourhood Watch magazine, things like that. So, but if we're not coming along to your parish meetings, I know it's just 5 minutes for a quick report. We'll do that. I think one of the Bets here is vice chair of the crime prevention panel. Just wanted to say something.
Yeah, on the Tom-Tom routes and Garment, if you actually bring them up, they can try to default them back. So sometimes if you get the parish council or somebody to start giving them some phone calls and some emails, they will look at whether the route is correct. If it's not correct, they can actually default them back.
And we've worked in other areas to do that, and we heard the other day about some areas we did over in the coastal zone about how we've done that. But we can also put up some signage, or get some influence in relation to some signage which does push people different ways as well.
So we'll take that forward. If you'd like to drop us an email with a few details, definitely we can get on the system, please. So was that related to that?
Yeah, it's related actually. I'm Wellington Parish Council. We've got a very similar problem to Tottenham now that we've got 2,500 houses up the road, and everybody seems to want to cut through our village to go to the base, etc. We were told by Highways a year or so ago that we were only a C road and they couldn't do anything. We persuaded them to actually look at the figures, so they did a survey themselves and found that we were the busiest C road in Suffolk.
Right.
And so consequently they were going to do some traffic calming. It's now 1 year later, and we've done another email last week demanding some sort of response from them, even if it's only by email to say they're going to do something, and we're still getting no answer. I'm not making out you're responsible at all, but it just goes to prove that this joined up situation that you were talking about earlier with other authorities certainly doesn't work with Highways, because Wellington is appalling, the speeding that goes on in the village, and we're doing just the same as Tottenham. We've got our own people out there, we've invested in speed guns with the help of yourselves to train the people, etc. And while they're out there, people do slow down. but you know, 50, 60 miles an hour through the village, it's just frightening. It really is.
And it is, well, it's a form of
Yeah.
antisocial
And one
behaviour,
easy
so it's-
answer to our little situation, and perhaps even Tottenham have got a similar situation, we should, you know, the traffic from Red Lodge should be encouraged, if not forced, to go down to 5 ways.
Yeah.
You know, they're cutting through us and then into Mildenhall, so the road through here is, it's been, you know, it's crazy stuff.
If you'd be kind enough just to put a few details down, I will certainly take that up when we have our next meeting. I've got a meeting coming up soon with James Finch.
Yeah.
Peter, is that all related to that? Because it's not really patient.
Well, it's just that I wanted to add on to that, of course, when planning permission is given for new estates, then nothing occurs with any of the roads that the new people are going to have to use.
Yeah.
And we feel that Red Lodge was built without any thought as to where the traffic was going to go. So our C road is
I know there is an ongoing problem, and I know highways are not renowned for their boom boom speed of response, and they're pretty slow to say the least. But if you did, let me have the details and we'll see what we can do about it, I promise you. Now I'm going to come to the lady who's very patient. Sorry about that.
Several references have been made this evening to the safer neighbourhood teams. I don't know how many people in the room are familiar with them. How do you promote those meetings?
What the actual the priority setting meetings?
Priority setting meetings?
No, the actual meetings themselves, which used to be open to members of the public.
We went through a period where we were gathering that information, but nobody was coming along to those meetings.
Because they weren't being publicised.
We were doing our best to publicise them, and actually we found that across the board, and that's not just here in Forest Heath, that's across the county. And actually, when we were holding the meetings, we weren't really getting much, if anything, from them. I mean, tonight's fantastic, and a fantastic example of the information we can get. Our best source of information is always the letters, the emails, the interaction we have on the street with people, and that by far is our best source of information. Now, because we were having meetings and nobody was coming, even though we were advertising them, we were putting posters up, we were putting them in the local papers, we were putting them online, people just weren't coming. We were using staff to go along and sit there. We were even having to hire out a hall in certain places where we couldn't get, nobody was coming. So as a trial, we have stopped doing those meetings, and I've written to every single parish and town council in the district, explain that we're going to take a more dynamic process about those priority settings. But those formal meetings now, we've stopped. But I'm willing to take on if you really miss them and they're really valuable. But I'll be honest, we were spending a lot of time, a lot of bureaucracy, a lot of money on them, and we were getting nothing back. Because if somebody's got a problem, they email us, they call us on 101, our non-urgent number, they tweet us, they speak to us on the street. So if you've got a burning issue, please give us a call on 101. You can have my card, my work email address on. We want to hear what your issues are. But that meeting certainly wasn't the best way of doing it.
I think if I can just add to that, because we've been having a really good conversation around this in preparation for some meetings we've got later on this week. I'm aware of some really innovative ways of dealing with public access, and we've talked about how we've done stuff streaming online as well. What's really important is we deal with the community's issues. You're right about how we market our meetings and what it is to attract people to come in. Even if I might dare say, tonight is one of the best turnouts we've had, and it's fantastic. We get some really good subjects discussed. But out of the tens of thousands of people that live in the district, we need to make sure we gather what issues are there. So for people that actually don't leave their house because they're housebound, or don't leave their house because they choose to do their interaction through computer media, we need to make sure that we've got a broad range of information in. I've sat there and spoken, I'm aware of the trial that's being done. We are trying to work out how best we can deal with this going forward, be that through streaming the videos of the meetings online, be that through better publicity, but we need to make sure, and it's absolutely right what Matt is saying, we need to make sure we gather that broad range of information through social media, through face-to-face interaction, discussions with our staff, with our partners about everything that's coming in, as well as giving you the opportunity to make sure you can influence what we're saying. But our bit of the bargain back to you is actually once you've given our bit, your bit to us, we need to sit there and say, and from all of the people that we've spoken to and interacted with, these are the broad issues that this community is facing at the moment. So, we've got our bit of the bargain, you've got your bit of the bargain, and we're going to make sure going forward we know exactly how it is that we can get that from you.
Thank you. I would strongly disagree. They were not well publicised, and I had spoken several times to our local policemen. They were never advertised in the village newsletter. There was nothing put through the door. So I live in West Row, and that certainly did not happen. I also saw the SNT, because of the numbers of American personnel living in the villages, it was a great opportunity after that initial interaction that you personally had with them. It was an opportunity to encourage the Americans in our communities to attend this face-to-face. As I say, that was lost completely, and that may be why folks just didn't turn up at the meeting. This is a great indication there is a keenness and an interest for folks to come along, hear the issues and help in any way they can.
I think it's really important. I'm very pleased you raised it, because I said at the beginning, this is an opportunity for us to listen to what you have to say, and if there are ideas, we will certainly take them away. And just to give you a sort of parallel comment on this, as regards Police and Crime Commissioner, the old police authority might have had one communication a week from the public if you were lucky, not even 50 a year. Well, actually last year, I think we were just over 1,800 emails and requests to do things. If there are questions that come through, if there's something that they're not happy about, I can hand it straight to Gareth and get it sorted out for people. So there's always that. But as I said, ideas, nobody's saying everything's perfect, it's not that. But if there are other ways we can engage, that's really important. Like I've been to the SOUT meetings and so on. There are all sorts of mechanisms, all sorts of different communities. Gareth and I will be embarking on what we call our on-tour events, one in each district. I think the one in Forest Heath is in Newmarket sometime in August, during the middle of the day for 3 or 4 hours outside the that shopping centre. Yeah, that's where we were last year. People can just come along, don't need a point, come and talk to us. So there's all sorts of things. We'll be doing a live web chat. So we've got to try and pick the range of things that suits everybody, but communication is absolutely crucial, and we need to see what we can do to improve it. But thank you very much for that question. David?
Yes, could I just go back one step? And I'm personally on this, with the Worlington, Tuddenham, Erriswell problems. It all, as far as I'm concerned, stems around Barton Mills Roundabout. I will not go around Barton Mills Roundabout being dragged by horses, because you take your life in your own hands. If I am going west, the easiest way west for me now is to cut through Mildenhall, Worlington. It's so simple to drop down on the A11 at Red Lodge, and it's quite a useful. I do try very carefully to keep the speed limits for various reasons, as you know. The same now if I'm going to Bury, I cut through Erriswell. The new underpass on the A11 makes that journey through Ealing that way much easier. The Department of Transport, when they designed Barton Mills roundabouts, I think they had a day off and left it to somebody in the back office. It is appalling.
It is very.
If we have quite a lot of HGVs come on the farm, those poor devils sitting on the A1101 trying to get out with a 20 or 30 ton load on the back, starting from zero, you take your life into your own hands. I understand when that was built, the ducting was put in for traffic lights. They desperately need those traffic lights.
That's the only way you're ever going to improve that, isn't it?
And I can only sort of reiterate that.
Yeah.
Because
well, maybe that's something again we can see where we can get to with that.
Could I have just one more?
Of course.
I want a pat on the back for you as people. Tim, as you know, I'm very sensitive about the volunteer sector.
Yep.
And I think the constabulary need a pat on the back for the way they are training and using their special constabulary today. I did 30 odd years in the specials a long while ago. But when I see what the lads are doing out there today, the way they're being used, the training they're getting, you've got a huge resource there. And this is something which we as members of the community want to encourage, because they're people who live within our communities, work within our communities who are doing it. And I think they're unsung heroes today on the work they're doing. And I think they need a pat on the back, and the Constable needs it as well.
Well, thanks for that, David. I know Gareth wants to comment, but it's a clear part of our policing crime plan. I said that right from the word go. They are volunteers, as you say. They come from within the community. They know the localities. We put a huge amount into supporting the Special Constabulary. I try to go to all their annual meetings, all three of them, as do the others and so on. And it's really important we recognise the huge input they have to keeping people safe in Suffolk. It is second to none. In fact, I think, I can't remember who it was who said to me, well, of course, we couldn't manage it out, and that was at the meeting at Bury last year. That was Andrew Mason, that's right, I remember he said it to me. And that is so true. We launched the specials or volunteers on horseback at the Suffolk show, the volunteers, eyes and ears in the community. People laughed when I suggested it a year ago, but actually we've had several people want to do that. We're looking for people to help with cybercrime unit and all these other things that people who've got expertise, be it from professional services or other areas of expertise. We've got 2 rural specials teams, a lot of people from the farming business, as you and I know. Really, really important that we do that. So if anybody's got any other ideas, we've got a team up at on the Broads up near Lowestoft, focusing on patrols there, keeping the waterways safe and looking after the tourist business, which of course is another huge part of the economy. So any ideas people have got for specific dedicated units, I can assure you right behind it. And one other thing I did over a year ago, made sure we've actually got a properly resourced coordinator for the specials. That didn't exist beforehand. I don't know why, but it is there now, and that will stay. So Gareth, I don't know, do you want to...
Just a couple of points, Tim. Last week was our award ceremony, and just to reinforce it, we gave an award to a special constable that did 1,000 hours a year voluntary work in Bury. Now, if you realise that that's on top of a full-time work commitment, that is a colossal amount of time that they give up. In addition to that, Karen Harris, who runs our volunteers, is very good at persuading people to come forward and volunteer. And I had the pleasure of doing a meeting last Wednesday, when all the volunteers, well, not all the volunteers, but a number of the volunteers all got together, and they range from people that look after our museum to people who go and pick up a police car and deliver it from one place to another. It's an absolutely fantastic resource that's available to us. And Karen, you're right, needs to be applauded for the work that she's done, as do the volunteers and the specials as well.
But thanks for that. We'll definitely pass it on to Mick Mann, who I know you know, and I'm sure he'll be very pleased. Robin.
Tim, thanks very much for coming here. For those who don't know me, I'm a councillor here in Forest Heath and the Deputy Leader of Forest Heath District Council. I wanted to pick up on one of the points you made about domestic abuse, because for the benefit of people in the room, is something I feel very strongly about as well. And what Tim has actually done is stuck his neck out by commissioning quite a controversial report, which gave some strong messages to the way that those crimes are handled here in Suffolk. But I just wanted to endorse what you said, and particularly your attitude towards the victims of crime, that being one particular example. So many thanks for that, and that's something I hope we can work on more as we go forward. But I'm not standing out to just blow smoke either. Just listening this evening, I'm really struck by the variety of issues which are being brought up by people. And I'm also perhaps a bit more conscious than most that a lot of them don't rest on your desk. Things like where new housing goes, what sat-nav routes are taken, and such things. So I'm also struck by the reference to the parish councils, and I know that here in the West we've tried to organise quite a vibrant parish forum, which meets every couple of months. And I wonder if you'd be willing perhaps to come back and speak to the parish forum, because there, every parish in Forest Heath has a voice. And if this is a recurring problem of traffic and speeding going through the communities, and if it's a problem that is not just one of enforcement, but one of routes and settlements and planners not taking those things into account, then we really need to get more collective voice, if you like, and lift that up to the next level and go to Parliament with it, go to our MPs, and I'd be very happy to invite you along for that if you will.
Be very, very happy to. I think it's a very good idea, Robin, because it's this part of engagement, ladies and gentlemen, is absolutely crucial to the role that I have. It is to represent you, and you are in a position where hopefully you can have a better degree or greater degree of influence. It's not trying to be big-headed, but that is what the Police and Crime Commission is there to do, to represent your views. And after all, you're the people who pay the taxes, and it's only reasonable you should get, as far as we can, the service that you need. And as you rightly say, Robin, not all these things are down just to the constabulary or me or whoever it is, but there needs to be a joined-up collective approach. It is difficult. I have to say that dealing with Highways England, it's now called, is remarkably tedious and frustrating. We're not going to give up. The Highways Authority, the County Council Department, I think with a new portfolio holder there and perhaps a new leader, will ginger it up a bit and make it apply a lot more common sense and realise it's about public service and not about self-service. And I think sometimes politicians need to hold some of these guys to account and tell them to stop mucking about and realise they are there at the behest of the people and business in Suffolk, and jolly well go, run along and sort themselves out a bit more effectively, because it doesn't always happen. So if we work together, we will certainly do what we can on that, I can assure you. So it's really important to do that, but good idea. So,
speaking as a Rotarian, there's several of us here.
Right.
I thought, I won't ask a question, I'll just tell you what we think of you.
Right.
It's to say that your initiative to send disadvantaged young people on Rotary Youth Leadership courses is an outstanding success.
Yeah.
And I think it was very clever of you really to identify that sending children, young, well not children, they're young people, who have very few opportunities on course, where generally it's the select few who get to go on these things.
Yes.
And having met several of us went last year, met several, it's life-changing.
Yeah.
And to spend your budget, part of your budget, on such a thing, it could invite criticism when you're to do with police and crime, but in the long term, it's just been a fantastic success. So good on you.
No, well, that is really, really kind of you to say that, and that all stemmed. We spend about £5,000 a year from our crime disorder reduction grant, ladies and gentlemen. It's your money, it's not my money. I'm just there to sort of facilitate it. I'll just share with you a story. I used to run a scout group for 25 years. I started doing it when I was, I think, 22. I'm 55 now, so I've done it for a few years. But I hand it on to a chap who used to be in the scout group. This was up at Iron in Suffolk, just the north of where I live. And it's always struck me, there are a lot of people who are not nearly as fortunate as I am in society, a lot of youngsters who perhaps haven't got proper parental role models, don't come from a very happy home background. And I do know that people are not born evil or bad, but very often they stray away from what we would like to consider good behaviour through no fault of their own. But if you do give them the opportunity to turn their lives around, I think, I've seen it, you can make a success of it. And one of the reasons for supporting the Rotary clubs, and again I'm not blowing smoke here, because I think the work that you do on a voluntary basis to help people who are less fortunate than most of us is second to none, and it is really, really important. That is one of the great things about society in Suffolk, looking after those who are less fortunate, fallen on difficult times, whatever it happens to be, is a really important part of our way of life. And if you give these youngsters, most of them, I think the youngest age is 18 up to 24, something like that, they can come from very difficult backgrounds, completely lacking in confidence, don't even know some of them how to come up and shake hands, look you in the eye and all these sorts of things. I was really humbled when we put the money into the first group that went through up at Grafton Water. They go for a week's residential course. The change it had made. We did that again last year, we're doing it again this year. And even if that's only a drop in the ocean, those 5 or 6, 10 people that are helped each year, they will become good advocates, messengers in the future. If you help them turn their lives around so they're good, upright citizens and so on. I'm not trying to be wet and soppy about this. It is really, really important. And it's actually quite moving when you see what can be done. And I think as long as we can continue to do that and support you in that work you're doing, we're very happy to do it, because it makes a difference. And that all happened because I was invited, I think it was not long after I was elected, I spoke at the, yes, it was a mill house in restaurant in Sudbury, speak at one of the Rotary functions there, and it all started from there. So So what I'm saying, ladies and gentlemen, if you know of people like that, do get in touch with your local Rotary clubs, put forward names and ideas and suggestions, and we'll see what we can do to help. But I hope it will go on for many years, because it's an invaluable thing to do, it really is. But thank you very much for mentioning it. Any other questions?
Just an observation. You
Yes.
mentioned the museum.
Yes.
Can I just say what an excellent idea this is? Because if this government gives any more cuts, it's the only place we'll see a policeman.
I wouldn't entirely agree with you there, but I know. But no, it's a resource at headquarters. There was a big feature in the East Anglian Daily Times on Saturday about it, a double-page spread, which is very good. But no, it's always interesting to look at what used to be done. And we've got an intern. That's another thing we're doing for young people, and work experience at the moment. And if you look at some of the big chains where they used to tie people to the wall and so on, things of course have moved on since then. But when you go back and look at some of the kit, it's quite interesting, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, a couple of things. First of all, I still think of myself as very young. Unfortunately, I walk past the boxes in the museum and realise that they're equipment I've used throughout my service. The more equipment in there, I guess, the older I am. But the second point is just to go back to volunteers. Do you know, we've got 3 people that are in there regularly, 3 or 4 people in there regularly. We've got somebody that goes in there and is skilled in the museum business, actually goes in and spends her spare time cataloguing everything we've got and making sure we're keeping it in the conditions to enable future generations to have a look at what we used to do. So some excellent work for the volunteers and some reflection time for me, I guess.
Where is that, Chris?
It's at Martlesham.
It's at the headquarters. Yeah. So, well, thank you very much indeed, ladies and gentlemen. I would like to thank our, I almost say resident volunteer, John, who's been filming the proceedings for us this evening. They'll be going up on the website. It's not a commercial exercise. He does it for nothing. So once again, very grateful to John. Travelling up, this time not from so far away, from Haverhill. If he has to go up to Lowestoft, he's got about an all-day journey there and back. But we do appreciate it, John, for this. So that'll be going up on the website probably sometime next week. And if you do want us to come and talk to some meetings like Robin has suggested and so on, please do get in touch. The contact cards are here, and thank you very much to Sandra and Vanessa for helping organise tonight, and of course to Gareth and Matt for coming and answering your questions. So hopefully we'll see you all before too long, but thanks very much indeed.